The Galactic Academy floated above a blue star, shining like a jewel in space. It was the greatest place of learning in the known galaxy. Species from hundreds of worlds came here to study science, war, culture, and life itself. Today, one large lecture hall was completely full. Alien students sat in long rows, their eyes glowing, antennae moving, tails flicking with boredom and curiosity. On the main screen behind the podium, one word appeared in bold letters. Humans. The reaction was immediate. Some students laughed. Some clicked their mandibles in mockery. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Humans were new to the galaxy. Late arrivals. A small species from a weak world called Earth. Compared to ancient empires that were millions of years old, humans were nothing special. A tall professor stepped forward. His skin was pale silver, his voice calm and controlled. He was known for never joking during class. Today, the professor said, we will study human biology. That only made things worse. The laughter grew louder. One student whispered, why waste time on primitives? Another said, they still fight each other on their own planet. The professor waited. He did not raise his voice. He simply waited until the room slowly became quiet again. He waved a claw, and images of Earth appeared on the screen. Forests, oceans, cities, storms, wars. Humans evolved on a dangerous world, he said. Predators. Disease. Constant conflict. A few students rolled their eyes. Every species had danger. That was nothing special. Then the professor changed the slide. The new image showed a chart filled with numbers and symbols. It was about reproduction. Most students stopped paying attention. This was basic biology. Every species followed the same rule. Mating season. Limited fertility. Controlled population. The professor pointed to the chart. Human females have cycles, he said. But human males. He paused. The room was silent. Do not have a mating season. For a moment, no one reacted. Then laughter exploded. Some students clapped. Some leaned back in their seats. One even said loudly, impossible. The professor did not smile. Human males, he continued, are fertile at all times. The laughter slowly died. A few students checked their tablets. Others stared at the screen again. The data did not change. Always fertile. No seasonal limit. No waiting period. A tall insect-like student stood up suddenly. That violates natural law, he said. Every species needs recovery time. Control. Balance. The professor nodded. That is true. For every species except humans. A strange feeling spread through the room. One student with wide black eyes raised her hand slowly. Her voice was careful. Professor, does that mean human males are always capable of reproduction? Yes, the professor replied. Another student spoke, his voice shaking slightly. Even during war? Yes. During starvation? Yes. During disaster? The professor paused, then answered, especially during disaster. The room went completely quiet. The students were no longer laughing. They imagined their own species trying to survive without seasons, without rest, without limits. Most of them could not. The professor stepped away from the podium and looked across the class. Humans did not evolve for peace, he said. They evolved to endure. A low sound passed through the hall. Fear. Confusion. Something close to disbelief. One student whispered to another, that's not a trait. That's a weapon. The professor heard it. He did not correct the student. Instead, he changed the slide again. The screen now showed the human symbol, glowing softly. This, the professor said, is only the beginning of what makes humans dangerous. The bell rang, ending the lecture. But no one stood up. The students stayed frozen in their seats, staring at the word humans, no longer laughing at all. The bell had already rung, but the alien students did not move. The classroom felt heavy, as if the air itself had changed. Moments ago, humans were a joke. Now, no one was smiling. The professor stood silently, watching their faces. One student finally broke the quiet. He was young, his skin still changing color with emotion. "Professor," he said, "there must be a mistake in the data." The professor slowly shook his head. "The data comes from direct human records," he replied. "Medical files. War reports. Survival studies. It has been confirmed many times." Several students looked down at their screens again, scrolling fast, hoping to find an error. They found none. A reptilian student leaned forward. His voice was low and uneasy. "If human males are always fertile, how do they control their population?" The professor answered calmly. "They don't. Not in the way you understand." That answer caused a ripple of discomfort across the room. Another student spoke, her voice tight. "Every species has limits. Seasons exist for a reason. Without limits, a species collapses." "Yes," the professor agreed. "Most species do." He changed the image on the screen. New pictures appeared. Ancient human wars. Cities burning. Empty streets. Mass graves. These events, the professor said, should have ended humanity. The students watched silently. But instead, he continued, human populations recovered. Faster than expected. Stronger than before. A student at the back whispered, "Because they never stopped reproducing." The word sounded dangerous once spoken aloud. The professor nodded. One alien student suddenly felt cold. His species reproduced once every 10 years. A lost generation meant extinction. "How many humans are there?" he asked. "Over 8 billion, the professor replied. A shocked sound moved through the class. That number, the professor added, was higher before their last global crisis. A tall avian student slowly stood up. "Then humans don't fear extinction," she said. "They outrun it." The professor looked at her with interest. "Correct." The student's thoughts began to shift. This was no longer about biology. This was about strategy. Survival. War. One student asked the question everyone feared. "Professor, if humans faced total defeat, what would happen?" The professor was quiet for a long moment. "Humans would retreat," he said. "They would hide. They would suffer." The students relaxed slightly. "But," the professor continued, "they would reproduce." The relief vanished. "They would rebuild," he said. Quietly. Patiently. "And one day, they would return." Silence crushed the room. An insectoid student clicked his mandibles nervously. "That's not survival," he said. "That's inevitability." The professor did not deny it. Another student whispered, "No wonder they fight so hard for their children." The professor changed the slide again. This time, it showed a simple sentence in human language. "We survive." "Humans do not think in cycles," the professor said. "They think in generations." The idea scared the students more than any weapon. A small student near the front raised his hand. His voice trembled. "Professor, are humans aggressive by nature?" The professor considered this carefully. "Humans are emotional," he said. "They love deeply. They protect fiercely." He paused. "When threatened, they become relentless." The students exchanged nervous looks. One student whispered, "Then why haven't they conquered the galaxy?" The professor answered honestly. "Because they have not needed to." That answer stayed in the air like poison. The classroom doors slid open suddenly. A junior instructor stepped inside, looking disturbed. "Professor," she said quietly, "we just received a notice." The professor turned. "What notice?" The instructor swallowed. "A human exchange group has been approved," she said. "They will attend this academy, starting tomorrow." Every student froze. The professor slowly faced the class again. "Class dismissed," he said. This time, everyone stood up at once. As they rushed out, none of them were laughing. Because tomorrow, they would sit in the same room. With humans. The next cycle, the Galactic Academy felt different. Word had spread fast. Not just about the lesson, but about the message. Humans were coming. Not as a topic. Not as data. But as living beings who would sit in the same classroom. Alien students filled the hall again, but the mood was tense. Seats that were once relaxed were now stiff. Eyes kept turning toward the entrance doors. The professor arrived early. He stood at the podium, reviewing his notes. His expression was calm, but his mind was focused. This lesson mattered. A soft chime echoed through the hall. The doors opened. 3 humans walked inside. They were smaller than most students. No claws. No armor. No glowing skin. They wore simple academy uniforms and carried data pads like everyone else. At first glance, they looked harmless. But the alien students did not relax. They remembered the data. Always fertile. No mating season. Endless recovery. One human male smiled politely as he looked around. He nodded to a nearby alien student and took his seat. That small action caused a ripple of unease. He looked friendly. Too normal. The professor began the lesson. "Today," he said, "we continue our study of human survival." The humans listened quietly. They did not interrupt. They did not react when the screen showed images of Earth's wars and disasters. One alien student watched closely. The human male did not flinch. His face stayed calm, almost thoughtful. The professor spoke about population loss. About human history nearly collapsing more than once. "Why didn't you stop?" a reptilian student suddenly asked, unable to hold back. The question echoed in the room. The professor looked at the human students. "You may answer." The human male stood up slowly. He did not look proud. He did not look angry. "We didn't know how," he said simply. The room went silent. Another alien student asked, "Didn't fear stop you?" The human thought for a moment. "Fear pushed us to protect what mattered." "What mattered?" the professor asked. "Family," the human replied. "Future." That word stayed in the air. Future. An alien student realized something sharp and cold. Humans did not survive because they were strong. They survived because they were focused on what came next. The professor changed the slide again. It showed a comparison chart. Alien species with limited fertility. Humans with constant fertility. This trait, the professor said, means humans never pause life to recover. Life continues through pain. One alien student whispered, "That means loss never truly ends them." The human male looked at the screen and nodded once. "Yes," he said quietly. A student near the back stood up. His voice was tight. "Then humans don't fear extinction." The human shook his head. "We fear it," he said. "That's why we fight it every day." The answer unsettled the room. The professor watched the students closely. Their fear was changing. It was becoming understanding. Another alien student asked the final question. "If humans are this unstoppable, why are you peaceful?" The human looked around the room. "Because survival doesn't mean conquest," he said. "It means continuation." The professor ended the lesson shortly after. As the students stood to leave, none of them rushed out this time. They glanced at the humans. Not with laughter. Not with fear. But with respect. As the lights dimmed, one alien student realized the truth. Humans were not dangerous because they were always ready. They were dangerous because they were never finished. And the galaxy had only just begun to understand them. The days after the human class were strange. Alien students no longer joked in the halls. Conversations stopped when humans passed by. Not because of hatred, but because of uncertainty. No one knew how to act around a species that refused to fade away. The Galactic Academy had studied conquerors before. Warriors. Destroyers. But humans were different. They were quiet. In the next lecture, the professor stood before the class again. Humans sat among the aliens now, not separated, not protected. Equal students. Today, the professor said, we discuss consequences. The screen behind him changed. It showed simulated futures. Hundreds of them. In many, alien empires fell. Not always by war. Sometimes by time. Sometimes by birth rates slowly reaching zero. Then the simulation showed humans. In every future, humans were still there. Sometimes fewer. Sometimes scattered. But never gone. An alien student felt his chest tighten. How? He asked softly. The professor answered. Because humans never stop replacing themselves. A human female spoke up gently. We don't think of it that way. The professor nodded. That is part of what makes it dangerous. The class listened as the professor explained how most civilizations plan survival in cycles. Peace time. Recovery time. Reproduction time. Humans ignored the cycle. Life continued during war. During hunger. During collapse. A tall alien student stood slowly. His voice was calm, but his hands shook. Professor, he said, if humans never pause, how do they rest? The professor looked at the human students. The human male answered. We rest after. That answer struck the room like a blow. After. After the danger. After the loss. After survival was secured. An alien student realized something important. Humans did not seek comfort first. They sought continuation. The professor showed another image. A human family sheltering during a ruined city. Children laughing while buildings burned in the distance. This, the professor said, is the human mind. The room grew quiet. Fear had been loud on the first day. Now it was deeper. Sharper. Mixed with understanding. A small alien student asked a careful question. Do humans know they scare us? The human male smiled faintly. We scare ourselves sometimes. That honesty changed something. The professor allowed open discussion. Alien students asked about emotions. About bonding. About loss. Humans answered honestly. They spoke of grief that never vanished. Of children born during war. Of love as an act of defiance. One alien student finally said what many were thinking. If our species faced extinction, he said, we would slow down to survive. The human shook his head. We speed up. The word stayed in the room long after he spoke. At the end of the class, the professor made a rare statement. History, he said, is written by those who endure. He looked at the humans. And endurance, he added, is humanity's greatest strength. When the lesson ended, alien students did not rush away. Some stayed. Some spoke to humans for the first time. Not as jokes. Not as threats. But as a species that had earned its place by refusing to disappear. One alien student watched the humans leave the hall and felt a strange calm. The galaxy did not need to fear humanity. The galaxy needed to understand them. Because a species that never stops living will always be part of the future. The report was released 1 week later. It did not come from a battlefield or a council of war. It came from the Galactic Academy itself. A place of knowledge, not fear. A place that now understood something the rest of the galaxy did not. The report was simple. No dramatic words. No warnings. Just facts. It explained that humans were not the strongest species. Not the fastest. Not the most intelligent. Their technology was still young compared to ancient empires. But they had one trait no other species shared. They did not pause life. Across the galaxy, leaders read the report in silence. Generals frowned. Scientists reread the data. Some laughed at first. Then they reached the final section. Population recovery models. Extinction timelines. Survival probability. Humans broke every equation. Civilizations fell when they lost too many people. Humans adapted. They changed structure. They changed borders. They changed beliefs. But they kept living. At the academy, alien students felt the shift before the galaxy did. Humans were no longer avoided in the halls. They were no longer watched with nervous eyes. They were asked questions. Not about weapons. About endurance. One alien student sat with a human male in the common area. "How do you keep going?" the alien asked. The human thought for a moment. "We don't think about stopping." That answer spread faster than the report. Another student asked a human female, "What is your greatest fear?" She answered honestly. "Leaving nothing behind." The aliens understood then. Human fertility was not about power. It was about defiance. A refusal to let the future disappear. The professor stood alone in the empty lecture hall that evening. The word humans still glowed faintly on the main screen. He remembered the laughter from the first day. How small and ignorant it sounded now. The galaxy had faced unstoppable forces before. Machines. Empires. Beasts. Humans were none of those. They were something harder to fight. A species that rebuilds while bleeding. A species that creates life while surrounded by death. A species that refuses to accept endings. When the Galactic Council finally responded, their statement was careful. Humanity is not classified as a threat, it said. Humanity is classified as permanent. That word echoed across systems. Permanent. Trade routes shifted. Diplomatic rules changed. Long-term plans now included one certainty. Humans would still be there. On Earth, nothing changed. Children were born. Families argued. People worked, loved, failed, tried again. They did not know that the galaxy had adjusted itself around them. That the laughter had ended. That fear had become respect. That respect had become caution. And caution had become acceptance. At the academy, a new lesson was added to the curriculum. Not under biology. Not under warfare. But under survival. The title was simple. Humanity, the species that does not wait. And every student who studied it learned the same truth. The most dangerous species in the galaxy is not the one that destroys the fastest. It is the one that never stops creating life. Because in the end, stars fade. Empires fall. Civilizations end. But humans continue.